Welcome to the Naavik Gaming Podcast, where it is our mission to explore the business and future of video games. We bring together the industry's brightest builders, investors, and thinkers to keep a pulse on current events, dissect emerging trends in games, share lessons learned, and have a great time. This podcast is also part of Naavik's growing ecosystem, which ranges from free and premium research to consulting and advisory services. For more information, visit www.naavik.co. Today's episode is brought to you by modl.ai, a team using the latest breakthroughs in agentic AI to transform how games are tested. Instead of relying on brittle scripts or deep integrations, Model QA+ uses computer vision and reasoning models so AI agents can actually play your game, finding bugs the same way a human would, only faster. Born from a company pivot earlier this year, modl.ai was rebuilt from the ground up to tackle one of gaming's hardest problems: generalizable gameplay without any integration work. The result is a black box QA platform that's fast, scalable, and learning with every run. Check them out at modl.ai to see how AI is reshaping game QA and learn how your team can benefit. Now, let's go to the episode.
Welcome to the Naavik Gaming Podcast. I'm your host, Kaylee Moore. Some of the most interesting businesses in mobile right now are the ones that most traditional gamers wouldn't pick up. They're the ones that are built around IP that live on our TV screens with hyper-engaged audiences and monetization models that are rewriting what engagement looks like on mobile. Today's guest is Terry Lee, who's the CEO of Fusebox Games, a studio that made a name for itself by taking the shows that everyone's obsessed with and building games around them that are even more addictive than the originals. Terry joined Fusebox Games at a moment when the studio was struggling with only one season of content a year, losing money for most of it, and has since helped turn it around in more than a $30 million business with some of the most engaged players in mobile. We're talking a 12% payer conversion rate in a genre where 5% is considered exceptional. Today, we're going to explore what it actually takes to build a content machine around licensed IP, why Fusebox Games treats its writing team as its biggest competitive advantage, even in this world of AI. We're also going to explore what the Love Island community tells us about how fandoms move between TV and games, and what Terry has learned about building a career worth following, including lessons from his recent book. Terry, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So let's dive in. I want to start simple. For anyone who hasn't come across Fusebox Games before, can you give us your elevator pitch, what you make, who plays it, and what makes you different?
Sure, yeah. So Fusebox Games, our focus is on interactive fiction, free-to-play games. So the way that I kind of explain this to people that don't know interactive fiction, it's like those choose-your-own-adventure books we used to have when we were little, where you kind of read through and then you make a choice and it says go to page X, and you go through and then you kind of read through and you're kind of choosing your own adventure. You're writing your own story. And that obviously happens in traditional games, but there's also kind of player action in those games. So there's normal gameplay, whereas interactive fiction definitely skews more towards kind of reading and less gameplay. So the gameplay is the kind of the reading. So that's our core focus, and we make those games for IP specifically. So for Love Island or Big Brother or Traitors. And the free-to-play aspect is a really interesting one as well, because again, like when it comes to monetization and you're talking about what makes players convert through storylines, it means that like a traditional TV show, you would have a hook at the end of every episode to kind of bring people back. We have hooks every few minutes, and those hooks are kind of monetized. Thus the kind of the 12% conversion rate that we were talking about. What makes us unique? I think it's probably just the quality of our writing and of our narrative. We have other competitors in the space, but they definitely skew more towards the more hyper casual and kind of large amount of quantity of content and user generated content versus very kind of bespoke writing, which is what we do. So every piece of our content is scripted and kind of like meticulously like edited to make sure that the quality is there.
And we're going to dive a lot deeper into both how you guys approach writing and the interactive fiction angle and also monetization. But I want to hear a little bit more about your role. So I believe that Fusebox Games started over a decade ago in 2014, right? But you joined a couple of years back at a really pivotal moment for the company. I know when we did our prep call, you mentioned that you joined when the studio was struggling around financially. I want to hear about what you walked into and what were the first things you focused on to turn things around.
Sure, yeah. So Fusebox has gone through quite a few iterations over, well, as you would expect over such a long period of time. And interactive fiction is only actually a fairly recent, adoption in the grand timeline. So when I joined, we had Love Island the game, and even then, Love Island the game in itself was successful. Um, in terms of coming off of the back of COVID, and Fusebox had been subject to the same over hiring and over kind of success during the COVID period that a lot of other game studios had gone through and subsequently have struggled in. So when I joined, we were on the back of, I suppose, that struggle where the audience had disappeared to a certain extent, and we were left with a fairly inflated team, and the monetization had kind of come off a cliff a little bit. And so when I joined, we had one season a year of content. I suppose to backtrack, like I joined as kind of head of studio, but from a product background. So I came into Fusebox with this idea of I'd play the games and I'd understand there's lots of improvements. Bringing my kind of free to play knowledge, there's a fantastic amount of free to play improvements for Love Island that weren't there, and actually there was, I still have the pitch deck that I did for my interview, where there's just like there's so many free to play mechanics and things, and I was like, there's 20% growth on this game, right? Just with free to play mechanics that didn't exist in the game. I quickly realized that our biggest problem was not actually the monetization. It was, the average revenue per user. Average revenue per user was actually pretty good, but the amount of content that we had and the amount of content that we were releasing was way too small. So for the headcount that we had. So as you mentioned, we were releasing one game a year, one season a year, and whilst we were releasing that content, our really kind of hardcore fans were playing that content and paying, and it was fantastic. But there was only one season, and then all of the other months of the year that we didn't have content, we were essentially losing money and paying for an expensive team. At that moment, we also had a studio in LA. So we were paying kind of quite expensive salaries and kind of setup costs to maintain a studio in LA. So the first thing was to focus on streamlining some of those things. So I basically removed the studio in LA. Unfortunately, we had to wind that down. But actually, when it comes to things like efficiency of working across those kind of time zones, it wasn't just the salaries; it was also the kind of the logistics of managing a studio where both teams were required to work on the game together, and so just handover times and the logistics of that really didn't work and really were impacting team morale. So the big thing was cut to start off with, and then start to focus on essentially building a pipeline to deliver more content.
And you saw a lot of success. So I know that you went very quickly from going to one season of Love Island content a year to three. And then I believe you said from 10 million to 30 million in roughly 2 years with fewer people, which isn't a normal trajectory. Uh, Can you walk us through? I mean, you just shared, a little bit about what had to change when you first took over the role of CEO, but it sounds like you saw results quite quickly.
Yeah, so I suppose to put it into context. So at that point, I was still a head of studio. So really, my main focus there was firstly the optimization. and we still had to see the old CEO at that point. But the biggest change was actually just challenging the team to do more. Like I know this. It might seem like a bit of a cop out answer, but I think in this day and age, sometimes just asking for people to do very difficult things is not done the way that it used to be. And we sometimes try and beat around the bush, or trying to kind of like go nicely, softly. But ultimately, the business was losing money, and so I ran an all hands, and I read the riot acts to everyone, and I said, look, the business is losing money. I can guarantee you, because this is what the data said, I can guarantee you, if we deliver 3 seasons a year, this will be an incredibly successful business. And obviously it's very easy to say that, and a lot more difficult to do. But I actually find that a lot of times people don't just say it, right? Like they think about the challenge, and they try and overthink like how to get there and work it all out before just saying, we need to get there. And it was very binary. It's either we get there or the studio closes. And so, and people having jobs is generally a good motivation, and continuing to have jobs is a good motivation for people. So in that sense, we were quite lucky because the data was just very obvious. We just need to deliver more content. How we got there was a lot of hard work from everyone else, and not that much hard work from me, funnily enough. Like, actually then, the onus of like delivering that plan went onto the senior team, the heads of departments, to kind of push forward. And really my job at that point was to work with the then like board members before we were acquired. So to work with the board members to generate confidence that this was a business that they could invest in. And we were basically out of money at that point, so we needed more investment from the existing board. So my job was to inspire confidence kind of up and down, right? So to the board members that we could do this, we knew what we needed to solve, and to the team that if we do this, we can deliver. And practically, how did we actually get there? We spent probably 6 months. We invested pretty much 6 months of solid time on pipelines and tooling, and revisiting like how we made the content. At that point, we were using an external kind of development team, and there was just so many inefficiencies in the process, and how we delivered content. And so we stripped away the external team. We brought some functions internally, and we invested in tooling. We built a lot of our own tools to speed up implementation of content. And yeah, like you said, we actually ended up delivering 3 seasons a year with less people because of that focus.
And you also ended up getting acquired after this too, as well.
Correct. Yeah.
Can you share that experience?
Yeah. So at that point, I was still head of studio, and the old CEO had left. So about a year after I joined, the CEO left, and I was pretty much the highest person in the business as a head of studio. So I was working with the board to kind of run the studio, and the board, obviously, the board members had very, very experienced people, and so they kind of helped me run the studio. And we picked up a CEO, a very experienced CEO, good at like founder CEO, whose remit was essentially to sell the business. Like once we'd got the business to generating profit, we had a very tired board at that point. The business has been around a long time. The cap table is, I think, 200 plus people. So there's a lot of minor investors, not a lot of major investors. Everyone's fairly tired of Fusebox at this point, and they're looking for an out, which is absolutely spot on. And I'd never sold a business. I had no experience at all, or any contacts in that area. So I moved to COO and continued to manage the operations in the studio, and to continue to push things forward and increase our revenue. And then Shakib, who's the CEO that came in to sell the business, did a fantastic job of going out there and kind of drumming up interest in Fusebox. And we eventually, we sold to Nazara, who are our parent company, and we're very happy. And then Shakip moved on because he's got his own things to do. He really just came in to focus on the sale. And then I moved into the CEO position after the sale.
Amazing. So now I want to focus a little bit more on the monetization success. So how I found out about you guys is I told you this on our prep call, but when I start my team calls every Monday, we share about the games that we played over the weekend or new games. And I had a team member who said that she continues to play the Love Island game and that she spent thousands of dollars on it.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really familiar with you guys. And it came out that she's not the only one on our team who's obsessed with the Love Island game and who's also spending lots of money. And you mentioned that you have a 12% paid conversion rate. And I believe you said the industry standard is 5%. That is a wild number. Can you speak a little bit of how the interactive narrative component is you attribute to that 12% metric?
Sure, yeah. Yeah. So I suppose, and also a bigger component to that is the way that we do user acquisition to start off with. So we target only payers. So we focus. So instead of going for mass, as in just targeting installs, we specifically target payers. So that in general improves our conversion rate. But what you get there is it's more expensive to acquire those players. But then obviously you are getting high quality players from the start. So essentially we have our volumes of acquisition are lower, but we're getting quality people that we know are in there, and we don't really try and reach for speculative installs. So that attributes to higher conversion rate in general, and that is already different to some casual games, or hyper casual games where they generally go for mass. Yeah. So they will just buy players rather than payers. So it's not all just Fusebox magic. There is method to the madness, but to acquire payers, you then have to have a lot of confidence that you can actually make them pay.
Yeah.
Because if you acquire payers and they don't pay, you end up losing money very quickly. And that is a knife edge that we work on every week. So we have a fantastic director of growth that is looking at our UA dashboard all the time, making sure that we never go over that line. So we're looking every day at cohorts that we acquire. Are they making money? And so it's very time intensive, but it means that we're acquiring great players to start off with. So already we've got two big things going for us. We've acquired people that we know already pay in other aspects of their entertainment life. So whether it's other apps or it's other games, or they've paid on something to do with Facebook or TikTok or Instagram. So we already have that in our back pocket, that we know that that the intention is high. And we already have the IP. So we already have trust signals, which again, when you are building a free-to-play game, one of your biggest kind of hurdles to start off with is trust, right? Because people will part with their money if they trust that the quality, what they're going to get back is right. The way that I kind of put this is, it's very difficult. Let's say, for example, we want to get our garden redone, right? And we're willing to spend the money, but we're not willing to spend the money on someone that just some random builder or some random person off the street. Right? So you hunt for people that you've got, that someone else has used them, and so they've got references or whatever, right? So you're willing to part with money, but only for people that you trust, because you don't want to get scammed. You don't want to waste your time and your effort and your money. Is exactly the same for games, right? So we already have that element of trust because we have an IP attached to our product. So we have two fantastic things start going for us before players even read one line of dialogue. But then comes the dialogue, right? So then comes the actual what makes Fusebox tick, and how do we get to that conversion rate? And essentially, it boils down to just the absolute quality of the writing team and the art team to look at data and to understand what people like, what people, how people convert. And I think that's I suppose it's the magic, the magic source of Fusebox is we don't just have writers and we don't just have artists. We have people that are incredibly interested in business and data. And to work in free to play, you need a special type of person. You don't just need generic artists and generic writers. You need people that are interested in business, that are interested in the psychology behind what makes people excited to come back and to do things. You're and to pay. And so we train people pretty much from the ground up in terms of use of data, in terms of like running A/B tests. So every time that a player will read a line of dialogue or go through and do a premium choice, that premium choice is being tested, it's being reviewed. Every player that goes through, every player after the first cohort of players that go through will maybe see a slightly different version of that, that's more efficient in either retention or conversion. Yeah, so it's a perfect blend almost between creativity and unit economics.
Can you give me an example of a premium choice that's become a runaway hit from a monetization standpoint?
Off the top of my head, I probably wouldn't necessarily know a specific premium choice, but what I could tell you is a really good example of how we do this. So in season 7, we had a love interest called Alex, who has become like this scenario has kind of become our kind of poster child for how Fusebox do what we do and why we do what we do. So for context for the audience, like we don't just release a whole season of content and then players play through that season. We release seasons over a set period of weeks, like a TV show, right? So you can't just come in and play the newest season of Love Island. You have to play what we call a volume, which is 3 episodes, and then you have to wait until next week. Now, there is a bit of method to the madness, apart from the fact it makes it easier to create a season because we're still kind of writing the end of the season as players start the beginning of the season. But the interesting thing here is we are looking at the player performance and the player data weekly. So every time we release a volume of content, at the end of that week, the data team will sit down and they will present to the entire company how that volume has performed, the love interest, where our players are going in terms of all of the different routes. But then we will start to build suggestions based on player behavior. So Alex is a fantastic example where he was one of the many love interests that a player could choose during the start of that season. And actually, we found overwhelmingly that players tended to try and couple up with Alex, and he was just a runaway. And sometimes you can predict this stuff, but a lot of the times I think it would be hubris to think that you could just predict it every time. So this is why we look at the data. So actually, what happened in that situation is we then rewrote later parts of the season to have more of Alex, but also to monetize more of Alex. So there's this constant evolving of the storyline as players are playing through, which you wouldn't get if you felt like you were just playing the game. You wouldn't kind of have that idea. You would think that it's all just rewritten already.
Yeah.
But it's actually being constantly rewritten based on the data, which is something that most games can't do, right? Most games, what you would do is you would redesign a level based on a cohort of people that have already played that level. So, right, so everyone, let's say it's like I've just used Candy Crush as an example, but like, let's say you have a level of Candy Crush that for some reason converts people really well because of like it's the right balance of gameplay and time and skill. But you get some learnings from that. What the team would do there is they would update that level to make it more efficient, blah blah blah. But then the cohort that data came from would move on. They'd be going on to the next level and the next level and the next level, and it's a very linear progression. And so the benefits would only then be for the people that haven't reached that level yet, right? So the new players coming through. But for us, we can change the data so that later on, that same cohort that had that interest and showed that data is now we're now basically rewriting content for that cohort, which is an absolutely fantastic way of releasing these games.
I love how active the Love Island Games subreddit is, especially alongside the fandom around the TV show. And it feels like those communities really blend into each other. How closely do you and the team pay attention to the game's subreddit and wider community conversations? Does that feature into your data?
We have a bit of a love-hate relationship with the subreddit community. I think so they're obviously an incredibly dedicated community, and they are, I would say, they're a vocal minority, but they're still a strong qualitative data point for us. The reason why I say it's kind of a love-hate relationship, it is previously we did have community presence where we kind of interacted with the community. And I don't think that it was managed particularly very well from our side. And in general, if you want to interact with a community, you have to be consistent and you have to follow through with the things that you say. And this was kind of before my time, but there was certainly, we did have a community manager, and I don't think the studio was really in the right place to not just to engage. Engagement is easy, but like follow through is difficult. And it becomes very disingenuous very quickly if you don't follow through and explain why you haven't followed through, or you don't you don't keep the back and forth communication. And people get very fed up if you're engaging and it feels like you're engaging and that they do have some kind of input, and then actually they just don't because there's no capacity. The studio is struggling. And the reason why, like, we also keep the community slightly at arm's length from our side, is it is quite quite an opinionated community, and there has been a couple of times whilst I've been here where we've had some junior staff that have been really affected by their work going out in the community and being absolutely decimated. And so my direction to people in the business is, like, senior people look at the community. We want to keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on, but generally I don't like junior people going out and scrolling through the subreddit, because I think it is difficult for more junior people to kind of to work in that environment. Like, the internet environments and subreddits, etc., are all Wild West places to be. But they are valuable data points and they are our fans. And so this is a very timely, because actually we just hired a community manager yesterday.
Oh,
She started yesterday, in fact. So it's been it's been like on my to-do list to re-engage with the community, but we needed to build the capacity at Fusebox to actually follow through with our interactions with the community, rather than just engaging with them and nothing else. And now we have built much more like of a structure at the business. We've hired more developers. We've just hired a product director. So there's more capacity now. We're not on firefighting mode as a studio. There's more capacity to engage and follow through with community interaction rather than just engage. And so we will be moving back out into the community and doing a lot more there, which I think is incredibly important for such an active community for us to actually engage with them, and hopefully we'll land that right. I think it is still a difficult thing to do and to do well, and I think you need some people with kind of quite thick skin to do that. So, but yeah, I mean, the community is very strong. We have just traditionally managed it very poorly.
So that's fair. And I know we're talking mostly about Love Island, but you do have other beloved games too. So, Love Island, I know, is a long-term beloved IP. You've also done Big Brother, which you've described as a bridge into more group dynamic storytelling. And Traitors, which everyone is very excited about, is your next big bet. How do you think about moving community across these different types of IP, or are you focused on building new ones from scratch as you launch new
Mm.
games?
So we're actually more focused on building a Fusebox community rather than individual game like individual IP communities. Because whilst there is crossover between like people that watch the show and people that play the game, we also see from some minor engagement we do with community around, like, sometimes we do like surveys, etc. Not that many people do still watch the show. I think there is a moment where we've taken some people into kind of more of a Fusebox community and more of like they like what Fusebox does, and actually the show might have moved. They might have moved on from the show. I mean, I think everyone dips back into Love Island every now and then, but certainly our focus is to build a Fusebox community, people that love what we do, rather than build like different pots and then try and link them together. So like a Traitors pot and a Love Island pot and a Big Brother pot. Is we've got a level of confidence now that people love what we do, and so that's our kind of community focus. Obviously, you still get people coming in from Traitors that may never want to play Love Island because they are fairly very different IPs. So I don't think there's necessarily we wouldn't try and cross promote someone in terms of you're a Traitors fan, you should come and try and play Love Island necessarily because of the Love Island IP, but more because of that it's a Fusebox game.
Yeah, the interactive storytelling component, right?
Exactly.
That can cross all genres if you like that type of gameplay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about the other IPs too. In your mind, what did Big Brother let you explore that Love Island couldn't, either creatively or commercially?
Yeah, so we were actually really excited, and we are still very excited about the Big Brother IP. The biggest thing for us is in the world of interactive fiction, specifically on mobile, um, most games out there are love related, right? The core focus is relationships, but more than just relationships more on the romantic side. So that's obviously Love Island, in a nutshell. And even our competitors is pretty much always erring on the side of like love relationships, etc. But interactive fiction, and relationships are very broad, right? Like you can create drama and relationship like situations in almost any IP. And that's the great thing about interactive fiction is that it's just storytelling, right? It's just relationships and drama, and you can have relationships and drama anywhere. But what we were unsure about with with Big Brother, or with moving away from from just purely romantic games, was whether or not the audience was actually there, right? So we picked up the Big Brother IP, and that was really a stepping stone, because there is still a bit of, you can still have a bit of romantic relationships in Big Brother, and there is in the game, and there has been in the TV show. But really, it enabled us to start to move much more and test the waters, I suppose, in terms of just like romantic relationships not being the cornerstone of why someone would play the game. And so we launched a short season of Big Brother to start off with, which was only 16 episodes. Normally our seasons are around 42. And so we released a shorter season just to test the water, just to see how things went. And Big Brother pretty much has the same KPIs as Love Island. So not in terms of LTV, because there's not as much content out yet, but in terms of conversion, in terms of retention, in terms of average revenue per user, episode on episode retention, it's pretty much as strong as Love Island, which proves to us it proved to us at the time that that these games can, interactive fiction can exist in a world that isn't just romance. Yeah.
That's really exciting. And you have Traitors coming. Actually,
Yeah.
do you want to Do you want to share what Traitors is in case not everyone in the Navic Gaming Podcast audience knows about the show and therefore the game? But I'd love to hear you introduce Traitors and then also talk about why you were the obvious partner to create that game.
Sure, yeah. So Traitors is a fantastic IP, and I'm going to butcher this because I think it probably came from somewhere, some kind of format even older than the one I remember. But I remember it mainly from there's a card game called Werewolf, which is a fantastic game where you kind of have a deck of cards and two people play werewolves, and then it's about group dynamics. It's about lying. It's about like how to stitch other people up, how to make friends. It purely is like that group dynamics, right? So and a lot of intrigue and a lot of like backstabbing. I'm sure Werewolf comes from somewhere else, but like that's as far back as I kind of remember the kind of the approach. But Traitors itself is an idea, exactly that idea where you have basically like traitors and faithfuls. So you have a group of people that go off. I think in the UK it's a castle. I think in the US it's also a castle. It's a castle in most places, but I think it could be big manor houses, etc. And they go off onto a location, and you have traitors and faithfuls, and the general concept is that the traitors, everyone has to last to the end, and traitors can essentially kill people off over the period of the TV show, and the faithful have to try and root out the traitors, and they do that by voting at the end of each day on a big like round table. And everyone will hold up their votes, and whoever gets the most votes gets voted off. And so I mean, that is the general premise of it. There's so much more that goes into the actual kind of the fundamentals of the show. But it just creates the most fantastical moments because the way that the way that the camera work is done in the show, like I think the show really takes it to another level in terms of just like seeing the group dynamics and seeing the camera work. And the traitors know who each other are, so they're trying to strategize. But the idea being that at the end of the show, if there's a traitor left in the final kind of few people, then they get a prize pot of money. So they've managed to lie and steal and cheat their way to the end. But if there's no traitor, then the faithful essentially get money. As a very high level, yeah.
So I know that Love Island and Big Brother, they skew very heavily female, but with Traitors, how are you thinking about the audience mix from a gender standpoint? And will this shift any of your design or writing choices?
So yeah. So in general, the Traitors IP, just on the surface, is a lot more mixed, right? So it's a lot less female dominated than Love Island, but Big Brother was also a shift in the direction of less female, orientated IP. So we have been moving kind of in that direction already, and our writers kind of understand how to write Big Brother and to write these scenes, because the romance side of things and the love side of things, that they are a critical part of the IP and of the writing when it comes to Love Island, but it's still just a tool in a writer's toolbox. And actually, if you strip away love related aspects and you think about just the fundamentals of what the writers are doing, they're essentially just creating drama, right? But whether or not that drama is love related drama or essentially it's relationship related drama, and relationship related drama can be in a love format, or it can be in a in a different format in terms of a different type of relationship. So in your question about the writing, generally we the same team that can write Love Island can write Traitors, because it's the fundamentals that are the strength of the team. In terms of our target audience, in general, the interactive fiction mobile target audience skews heavily towards women anyway. Now, whether that's a chicken or egg, because most of the games out there are romance related, and women generally play like the romance related games over men. So whether it's just because the games that exist in that genre are already skewed towards a female audience. So I don't generally see that our audience will change that much. I think it will still be predominantly women. I mean, Love Island, we're 95%. I think Big Brother, I think it's about 88%. So I think Traitors maybe could come down to 75%. But the interesting aspect is you always play a woman in our games. So there is no option to play a male main character.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's something we've explored. The problem is because we write all of our content, and as much as the people on Reddit might say that it's all AI generated, it's not. And so we're writing every line of content, and the problem with bringing in a male main character is you essentially have to rewrite the entire season. We'd have to go through and rewrite everything, or we'd have to create a very specific season of content where where you played as a male character, and we're not beyond doing that. It's just and people will hate this, it's just the data doesn't support doing it. The return on investment for us to spend an entire writing team doing that is not worth the amount of players of our player base that would actually play a male main character. That may change as we see our audience shift. And some, like some of our female players want to play as male characters, right? So I'm not saying that it's just as simple as a binary. If you're a male, you want to play a male character. Female, you want to play a female character. Like there is a growing audience that wants to do it. It's not enough for us.
I want to dive into something you mentioned in the answer to this question of people on Reddit accusing your games of being written by AI. Because one of the things I found most interesting is that you've grown your writing team significantly in a period where a lot of studios are cutting back on writers, and you've described your writing team really as your moat. I would love to hear a little bit more about your thinking and how much you've grown the writing team and how important it is to Fusebox Games to have those writers.
Yeah. So I think our writing team now is a third of the business, more than a third of the business. So we have 21 writers. And I think so when I joined, we've maybe had maybe 9. So yeah, it's grown significantly. So like you said, so writing really is our moat, and actually any content, like any of our content is our moat, right? So even art, in terms of we do use AI for some of our artwork, but the quality is still defined by the people that we have. So for both art and narrative, we look at AI as a tool to optimize and to get more out of the people that we have, rather than a cost-cutting exercise for removing the people that we have. Because and this is where every studio has to come up with its own kind of path through the kind of times we're living in. But like for us, we purposefully focused on optimization and using it to make people more efficient and get more out of the people we have, rather than the other way around. Because if we use AI as a race to the bottom, right? So like how quickly can we reduce our bottom line? It opens us up to being disrupted by 2 people in a basement that can make interactive fiction games, right? Because there's not a lot complicated about what we would do if we were just using AI, because we would get the same output as anyone else could get, right? The reason that we can do what we can do and we can get 12% conversion and is that the artwork and the narrative work that our team create is taking like a lot of detail. There's a lot of care. There's a lot of like things that go into that. And if we just to race to the bottom and use AI, then we'll be using the same tools as anyone else can use. So that's the biggest focus there. I mean, we are still investigating AI and understanding how it's going to affect our business, and we still have the same pressures as every other business of how do you optimize your costs in a world where AI is a thing. And we're taking kind of baby steps to try and get there. We're using AI heavily in data and things like that. So in some places we're using AI very heavily, but in terms of content creation, we're very much light touch at the moment. And that's not to say that we won't increase that over time, but it's a very small amount of what we currently do.
All right. I want to continue the AI conversation, but through a different lens. You recently published a book, CEO in 16 Lessons to Take Your Career to the Next Level, which walks through a lot of your learnings for people at any point on their career path. But you also mentor younger people getting into the games industry. And I think you have some really interesting insights into how young people are approaching AI, which could harm their ability to get a job. You shared with me an example of a junior artist talking about how she doesn't use AI on her resume. I was hoping that you could walk the audience through that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I mean, it was actually even more explicit than that. It was specifically anti-AI on her CV, right? So it wasn't even leaving it as a generic, as in not actively mentioning it. It was actually actively mentioning against using AI. So yeah, this came about in kind of one of my mentoring sessions, where I was reviewing her CV, and yeah, so she had on her CV that she doesn't use AI and won't use AI. And so I questioned that, and I said, look, how have you come to this? Everyone's got everyone can have their own opinion, right? But like, how have you come to this opinion, and how have you come to this kind of stance? And she'd said that on LinkedIn, one of the art directors that she follows, like, she really loves his kind of artwork, and he's quite kind of prominent in the industry. I won't say who it is, but is vocally anti-AI. And so, from her point of view, this is someone that she looks up to, that has made it in the industry, and is saying like that he won't use AI and he won't hire anyone to use AI. And I think the shocking thing for me at that point is just, I suppose, the issue with a very junior person that is just starting out in the industry, taking a very hard stance and advice from someone that has basically made it already and has career capital to be able to take that stance, right? And I think there's such a like chasm between those two people. This is someone that's probably going to retire in 5 years, 6 years, and can just ride the wave of that particular opinion, right? And has so much career capital that that's fine. And I actually count a lot of us that are in the industry right now to be quite lucky that I think we've just pipped in at the right time in terms of AI, where we've got to senior positions enough that it's going to be a lot less disruptive to us than newer people coming in to any industry, right? And so if you're in a job right now and you're worried about AI, I mean, we should all be worried about AI, but like, I would count yourself quite lucky, because the generation after this is going to have a much more difficult time. They haven't managed to get in-job experience. They haven't managed to crack that from junior to mid-level to senior. And that's going to be the most disruptive like generation of people coming into the industry. And so it really annoyed me. Like I kind of got a bit wound up, because it's the irresponsibility of someone that knows they have a platform to kind of to have such such a binary position without any caveat to it whatsoever, right? Like a pure call out of like being in a binary position, and no wiggle room, not taking into account the platform that they have and the people that read and follow them. And I think that's a big problem in LinkedIn, on LinkedIn in general, but it's also just, I suppose, a bigger problem. We won't go in too far, but like into society itself, right? We've somehow lost the ability to be able to have multiple positions on something, or to be open to something. It feels like now we just instantly jump to binary positions, for or against. Like we've lost the ability to be able to have a discourse where you can recognize someone else's opinion or someone else's situation is different to yours, and that may require a slightly different approach or a different opinion to yours.
I mean, especially on socials where people are competing with attention, right? You have
Exactly.
contrarian view. And I completely agree with you. The people who are starting out their games career now have a very different battle ahead of them than we did. If you could hand one chapter of your book to someone who's entering the game studio space who wants to work in games and say start here, which chapter would you choose?
So I think, yeah. So I think if it's someone starting out, then there's a chapter in the book called "Work-Life Balance Will Keep You Average," and really, it's the same problem that I see in terms of the AI and social media. Is this championing of, not just work-life balance, because work-life balance, a balance can be many different things for many different people. But there's a big push on leaving at 5 o'clock and demonizing overtime, to the point where people that are working overtime are questioned, like, oh, like, why are you working overtime? Are you okay? You shouldn't be working after hours. You should. And I think there is again a big problem where we have heavily indexed on well-being, which is absolutely fine. Like people should be taking into account their well-being and their mental health. But in general, I think we've also lost that kind of idea of, people. There are limited resources, there are limited jobs, there's limitations everywhere around you, and if you are trying to balance your work life in your 20s, your early 20s, if you're trying to color code your calendar for well-being, you are going to lose out to someone who's not. Right? You are going to lose out to someone who is pushing harder, who is still managing their time and managing their mental health, but like managing themselves in terms of seasons, right? And I go into seasons a little bit, and I think it's becoming quite a thing actually, like seasons of life. But like you will have seasons where you need to push, you need to sprint, you need to put a lot of work in, and be seen doing it. It's a sad thing that you shouldn't expect to need to be seen doing more things, or training yourself, or getting ahead. But that is the reality of what in the workplace is people that work harder, that grow themselves instead of waiting to be grown, get further in business. And again, on this idea of LinkedIn, is there is a lot of more senior people saying, yeah, you should be putting down tools at 5 o'clock and going and doing social things and stuff like that. It's just like, but those people weren't actually doing that in their 20s. Those senior people were still in the office, working weekends, like growing themselves. Even if you're not working at your job,
Yeah, you have
you
your
should
side hustle.
then be side hustling, or you should be just growing yourself, doing courses, like learning more, doing whatever. But just to think at night at 5 o'clock, that's it, I'm done. I'm not going to do anything to do with my career or anything to do with business. I'm just going to, go and do something else or relax. It's like people have earned the right to do that because they are now in senior positions. And if they go on LinkedIn and they say, you should be doing this, like color code your calendar and make sure that you're doing all these different things, it doesn't work for everyone. It works for people that have made it. And so my big push in the book is to help people understand that, and but also to understand that doesn't also mean just burn yourself out. But you have to take personal responsibility for your time, and how to push and when to push, and understand when you're in a season of push and when you're not. Because I think one of the biggest misconceptions about, if we were to say people should work overtime, is that you shouldn't always do it. You should have a goal and an ending, right? If you're just doing it for the sake of doing it, if you're just working 3 hours more every day to get more of what you've got done, you are going to burn out because you haven't got an end goal. You haven't got there isn't like, you haven't structured it like, okay, I'm doing this
to be strategic. I think
yeah, I'm doing this because of this, and when I've done this, when I've achieved this, I'm then going to have a bit of a relax. I'm gonna kind of, I'm gonna take my foot off the gas a little bit, and kind of and regain my energy.
I think this is very wise advice, and we're going to make sure to link your book in the show notes below if your readers want to check it out more. Okay, I have two final questions for you. Are there any types of shows or IP that you'd personally love to adapt into games that might surprise people?
So the surprise people is probably the tough question, because I'm pretty basic at heart, and I'm not particularly creative as a person. I kind of go where the money is.
So
So
we
there's
can
probably
scratch the surprise part of that question. What's on your IP wish
sure.
list then, even if it's the obvious answer?
So I've got an aspirational IP, which I don't know if there is ever any possibility we would be able to get, and even I get raised eyebrows in the studio. But is Friends.
I love it.
I grew up with Friends, and my wife is obsessed with Friends. Like, she can pretty much goes to sleep watching it. And the interesting thing about Friends as an IP is it was never there was never any it was never gamified. Like, there's a board game which I think is a Trivial Pursuit version of Friends.
Interesting.
And then there's t-shirts, and there's the normal accepted kind of like merchandise, but for such a huge like genre defining IP, there was never anything else. It's a very odd odd thing, and so I think there is a massive opportunity for us to be able to not to use the original cast or anything like that, but like the concept would be something like you are a new housemate in those two apartments, right? So you're a new housemate that comes in, and there's completely different, it's a completely different cast, but you're just retracing the dynamics of, so you're going, you're in one of the apartments, and there's the same dynamic, because the way that Friends is still the same as anyone that has a shared apartment, right? I lived in a shared apartment in London, right? Those fantastic dynamics are timeless.
Yeah.
Absolutely timeless. And the stupid things you get up to, like in shared apartments when you're in your kind of like your 20s and 30s. So those dynamics still exist. And I think, being able to tap into some of the iconic places like Central Perk and stuff like that, and just for players to almost like relive the locations without reliving the characters.
It's also probably the perfect time with nostalgia coming back too, and I think
Right.
the show probably ended 25 years ago
It's
now?
crazy, right? It's
It
absolutely
is.
crazy.
That makes me feel very old. Well, okay, I hope this works out. I look forward to playing the Friends game. And then to close, what is your favorite Love Island game moment or storyline?
So I think Double Trouble is probably my favorite, because there was obviously there were twins in the Love Island show, right? So they kind of managed to find twins that would go on the show. But I think Double Trouble for us was really interesting, mainly because I'd only been in the studio for a bit, and so it was one that I probably played first, like fully played,
Yeah.
which was good. But so I think just that idea of being the first season that you play of something, you get that kind of nostalgia aspect to it, or that just looking back on it. But I think what it did for me, rather than being particularly like a standout episode or standout like season or concept, was it opened my eyes to the possibility of what we can do that the shows can't do. Even though annoyingly they actually did do this, so it's not the perfect example, but when we speak to the casting director at ITV for Love Island, who they're fantastic, and it's an incredible amount of detail they go into cast all these people on these shows. But you can see the limitations they have. They actually have to find these people, right? So if you want twins on the show, you've actually got to go and try and find two twins that are willing to go on a show, right? and as and it opened my eyes to the point of like, as a studio, we don't have to do that. Like we have this, we can just come up with cast because we have that power. And we've really taken that through not just Love Island, but in terms of in terms of Big Brother and Traitors, is like we have this superpower that any casting director would kill for, which is that we can come up with any character that we want, any background. We don't have to try and source them, right? Like we can just go, right, this would be an absolutely hilarious person to put in the Big Brother house. Let's do it. And that kind of that moment of having twins in the game like opened up my eyes to that. Like I say, even though actually they did have twins in Love Island, so it's not the best example, but
I wonder how long it took them to find it, though. I'm sure.
Right, exactly. I think it was like season 6 of Love Island, season 6, 5. I don't know. It was a while before they managed it, and so. But there's a lot more you can do, right? There's a lot more using that example. You can go on and find, all kinds of crazy things you can do with a storyline.
Amazing. Well, Terry, thank you so much for joining us on the Nabbit Gaming Podcast. I'm very much looking forward to playing Traitors later this year. And as I mentioned, your book will be linked in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
If you enjoyed today's episode, whether on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, or give a 5-star review. And if you want to reach out or provide feedback, shoot us a note at podcast@naavik.co or find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Plus, if you want to learn more about what Naavik has to offer, make sure to check out our website, www.naavik.co. There, you can sign up for the #1 games industry newsletter, Naavik Digest, or contact us to learn about our wide-ranging consulting and advisory services. Again, that is www.naavik.co. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.